This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. It is I, Old Gingerface, here with you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all the rating and reviewing that's happening. I truly appreciate that. And don't forget to subscribe to YouTube and Instagram. Thank you. That's enough of that. Just throw it out there quick. I do appreciate that. Trying to build those accounts up. Before we get this most excellent guest on to be interviewed, I want to tell you a little bit about a disabled veteran-owned business, Black Box Safety. They've just been awarded a nationwide contract through Sourcewell to provide point-blank body armor to law enforcement agencies across the country. All agencies receive a 38% discount on point-blank vests, shields, and helmets. Point-blank is fantastic IMO, and excuse me, and a lot of other people's opinions as well. Get your team geared up with the most advanced ballistic protection customized for your department. To learn more, head over to blackboxsafety.com. Drop them an email at sourcewell@blackboxsafety.com or connect with them on Instagram at blackboxsafety. Give them a follow as well. All that information will be in the show notes. And thank you to Black Box Safety. Support them. Show support for TPS. Thank you. Also, I know there's a lot of admin and coppers that listen. This is who this is geared towards. I know there's grants and everything else, and we kind of we get the stuff from the people we get it from, and we kind of go along that way. But I would suggest that if you are not an admin, maybe you're an officer, bring this to admin. Let them know we can get the stuff we need, the vest, the soft body armor we need from a disabled veteran-owned business. Why not do it that way? Just an idea. Thank you, Black Box Safety. Today's guest, very excited to have him. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. The guy's done a lot, and he's also done some, it's in the intro here. I have a very professionally typed out intro that I'm going to give to him. Graham Dunn served as a U.S. Marine before his 27-year police career. He served as SWAT officer and sniper for 8 years, and also a full-time academy instructor for 8 years. He's highly decorated to include the Police Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, and multiple life-saving awards. He's been a pistol, rifle, and shotgun instructor since 1999. Besides training, he provides executive protection for many high-worth individuals, to include NFL owners, celebrities, and foreign royalty. He founded Ragnar Tactical in 2002 and teaches year-round. He just published his memoirs, The Jagged Blue Line, in 2024. Without further ado, let's bring on the great Graham Dunn. Graham!
Hi, Steve. How are you?
Good to have you on the show, brother. We were doing the pre-show convo, and we were going too deep because you've done a lot, my man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
It's awesome, man. I really am. It was interesting to talk to you briefly about the high-end bodyguard stuff because, like I said, and everybody knows I've told the story, and I get yelled at if I tell too many stories at the same time. Over and over again. But I did a little protection stuff in LA, and I just got thrown in the mix, and they were just like, "Hey, we need a guy. This guy's he can carry a gun. He seems okay." And they threw me on the detail for a celebrity, and it was like. It was stressful. It was stressful, man. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I had to tail this guy. But you do that for some like really high-end people and on a regular basis, it seems like.
Yeah. So when I was a SWAT guy, occasionally we'd have to supplement Secret Service, when POTUS came to town or any of his cabinet, and occasionally to be like a governor or an ambassador, and we get thrown in on that. So when I retired 5 years ago, I got a few phone calls from people in the business just saying, "Hey, we heard you retired. Are you interested in doing some work?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. I'll make a little bit of extra cash."
Yeah.
So that's how I got into it.
Hell yeah. Can you name any of the people that you worked for, just for the audiences?
Yeah, I can name a couple. There's a couple that I'm still working for that I've signed NDAs for that I can't. They would know them.
Yeah.
But like, for example, I was working for RFK Jr. on his presidential, when he was running for president before he got Secret Service protection. That was one. That was a big one. Also, Rob Lowe, the actor. And he and I have actually become somewhat friendly, and now I give him firearms training lessons on the side.
That's so cool, dude. I love Rob Lowe.
He's a great guy. He is truly one of the greatest people in Hollywood. And, I work out in California, usually 1 week a month. I'm on a detail out there. And with one of the top I would say one of the top 5 recognizable people in the world who I can't mention. But anyway, we could narrow it down pretty easy. But anyway, he just happens to live in the same city. So that works out perfect for us just getting together for range days.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool, man. It's so cool to see them just be normal people, be like, you know what I mean? Because they're larger than life on the screen. And when I went backstage at the movie awards, it was like, I don't know. It's just, I guess I don't expect them to be 10 feet tall, but when you see them and they're like normal stature, it's like, oh, weird, just a dude.
Yeah. Well, whenever I meet somebody who's really famous, I've found I haven't had any problems with them. As far as like them being aloof or being an ass to me. I have had problems with their assistants.
Yeah.
So, some of their assistants are just wound tight OCD types who they look at you as just a big knucklehead. And I'm a big knucklehead. But they talk to you like you're garbage. And, they know you're the hired muscle and they just talk down to you and tell you to go do things and squawk at you like you're a child. And I've had a couple of head bumpings with people like that.
I'm glad you say that, dude, because I got yelled at by LL Cool J's assistant. And I got not that I cared, but I got removed from the eligibility list for his detail for a month. I didn't even know. I just didn't get any calls for a month, and then I had only done it once. And then the head guy on it was like, "Yeah, we had to take you off." I'm like, he's like, "But you're good to go again." And I never did it again because they just would just call. I had kids. They would just call at the most random times, because they want to, like, they're celebrities. Their life is hard in this way. Like, hey, my wife and my daughter want to go out to eat, but I don't want them going alone. So they'll just, but you don't plan going out to eat like 3 weeks in advance. It's like, hey, we're going out to eat in an hour. And it's like, I can't.
It can be really high stress that way. And there's so much planning that goes into it when you're on a big detail. Like the detail that I work 1 week a month in California, there's 5 of us at a time on that detail. And everything we do, there's an advance, there's a follow. There's a lot of logistics to it. It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
It really is. And there's a lot of hurry up and wait. There's times where I'm sitting there for 2 hours just twiddling my thumbs. And then all of a sudden we're going. Like, let's be going in 5 minutes. And everything's got to be squared away and buttoned down.
Yeah, standing around's the worst. I did that at Selma Hayek's house. We delivered some diamonds for an award show. 3.5 hours standing in her driveway. Yeah. Wasn't allowed into the house. Me and other security guys. But I have to give it to Harry Winston. They had their boutique manager bring us food, which I thought was, they're like, what do you guys want? They brought us food because it was getting late. I mean, none of us had eaten. It's like, can you just pick the diamonds, please? Yeah. But that's the gig, and that's what you get paid for. So
and it pays well, and that's why it keeps me coming back. I mean, my wife's always like, you complain about it all the time. Why do you do it? And I'm like, well, you're right. And then I get the paycheck in my account, and I'm like, I guess I can deal with it another month.
Yeah, brother, you told me you flew out like Christmas Day, right? You got a call.
I did. I got a text on Christmas.
How pissed was your wife?
She's cool because my kids are adults, so it's not that big of a deal.
Okay.
But, I didn't have to leave the house till like 5 PM, so it wasn't like a big crush on our plans. But I was like, do you mind? I mean, I always say, do you mind? And she's like, no, you're good, And so I flew out Christmas night for a CEO in the healthcare industry. They're all scared right now, so they're all getting protection.
Course.
And every dipshit in the world, every wackadoodle is like putting threats online. So,
right.
I don't blame them for being scared.
Yeah, that is now a very scary job to have. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it's funny with the online stuff is like, you looking from the outside in, you can be like, yeah, he should just write that off. It's not real. But when it's you personally, like I've had some pretty sketchy messages sent at me because the show reaches enough people where when it goes beyond the fan base, you do get people that like don't like police, and they'll just send you a random threatening message, and it wigs me out. Yeah. I mean, I carry everywhere I go anyways all the time. But, I'm not always with my family, you know what I mean? And it's like, is this person for real or not? They never have been, but I can't imagine like thousands of people and then thinking, well, just statistically, a few of these people are capable, Well,
we're all vulnerable at times. I don't care what kind of a badass you are. You could just be sitting in your car and somebody puts one in your head.
Right.
You can't be on guard 365. So, like the one I live with in California 1 week of a month, they have, I would say, 30 to 50 threats at any given time. And I'd say most of them are just dumb shits who put something online, but a couple of them have actually like showed up at the house.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So they're like flown out and figured out where they lived. I mean, you can figure out where people live and stuff, right?
Yeah.
They bang on the door. They bang on the gate. It's a big old gate,
Yeah.
It's just like,
dude, not cool.
There's a lot of wacky people in the world, man.
Yeah, the internet is not helping. It's only helping them.
No, it makes it worse.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank God you're doing the job, man. I can see why people would hire you. Get so much friggin' experience. Can you go back in your career to a young Officer Dunn and think of the first hot call you went on that really gave you the adrenaline dump?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember my very first day on the job, and one of the reasons I remember is because they tell you you're going to have a week of just watching your field training officer do his thing. And early 90s, it was a little bit different. Like they just didn't care and about your feelings so much. So, I'm thinking, cool, I get to watch this guy for a week, right? And he walks in and he just throws me the keys and goes, go check out the car. I'll be out in a minute. And I'm like, okay. So then, I'm driving around. I remember my first call. It was some sort of family dispute. And I just remember driving past the house a couple of times. It was at night. And he goes, finally he bangs me on the shoulder. He goes, it's that house right there. So then I go in and this guy's drunk and I get him handcuffed and I'm thinking, okay, I know I have enough to put him in jail, but I don't know the exact charge, so I was kind of on the right path, but I was still kind of confused. And This guy would give me no help. Like we would go to dinner. It was silent in the car unless I had a question. And if we went to dinner, he'd sit with his friends at a different table.
So that old school. Yeah.
Yeah. Very old school. Right. And that just made me more nervous. And, I'm not saying be my buddy, but, at least talk to me, So I do remember that feeling of just being overwhelmed and going, oh my God, and I do remember the first couple of days going home and thinking, man, is this job for me? Like maybe I'm fucked up and maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And then all of a sudden it started to click, right? So
yeah. Is this guy sniffing something I don't realize? Is he like rejecting me? And all those thoughts. Yeah, I remember the first place I worked at, they said, before I worked there, they said, yeah, and you guys there was a lunchroom and there was a bench outside the lunchroom and that's where you sat. Like the trained full-time vetted coppers would go in and have their meal. And then you sat outside on a bench or a chair and ate without a table. I'm like, damn, that's pretty cold. That's just kind of the way it was.
Well, and I remembered that when I became a field training officer myself. And I also remembered that as a sergeant, when I'd have new people working for me on the road. I remembered how it felt to not know a whole lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to be frank and upfront with a trainee, not to pull punches. But at the same time, like they tell you in academy, like you can't, it's hard to learn minute details and complicated things when you're super stressed. So like, I remember when we had, academy was paramilitary and all that stuff, but when we like learned constitutional law or state law or whatever, the instructor was always like, would shut the door and be like, senior staff could come in here and you know what to do if they do. But when I'm teaching, please just put your shoulders down a little bit and just pay attention because there is a test you're going to have to pass. And I don't like teaching to like stressed out dum-dums. Like you need to absorb, have a question, raise your hand, that type of thing. And that was a big help in that atmosphere, But a lot of the like state agencies are big on the boot being like dirt or lower than whale shit. And like they pull up to the car and they got the boot next to him and the kid's just looking straight ahead and like he's having a full conversation with you, a town cop, and then like you don't even get introduced to the guy sitting next to him because he's not worthy, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't agree with that. I mean, I want things to be hard. Don't get me wrong. I want there to be a good vetting process, but it needs to be done properly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You've been doing fire instruction for a long time and which really fascinates me. And I kind of dumped some of my woes on you before we started about not having a big budget, not having a lot of time to train people and all that. Working for a big agency and teaching classrooms and stuff like that, did you have like similar struggles or do you have guys being disinterested and kind of having to tow them along?
Yeah. So, I mean, you got your regular bell curve in police work, right? Just like any occupation where you get your 20, 60, 20, where you've got 20% of people who are highly motivated. They really want to be there, and they're superstars. You got 60% in the middle who they're average employees, and they have their shining moments. They do well. And then you get 20% on the bottom, they're kind of turds, right? And not necessarily bad people, but lazy and maybe stupid.
Burnt out.
Yeah, or just don't care, right? Not necessarily like going out breaking laws or violating rights, but they'd probably be better off doing something else, right? So I dealt with that in training too. That was one thing. There was like, for example, when I worked on the range, there was a couple people where when they came out for in-service training or for qualifications, I'd grab one of my assistants and I go stand behind him and make sure he doesn't kill himself or us.
Yeah.
Like, you're assigned to him. Do not leave him because he's so effed up, right? And then the other big problem I had as a full-time trainer was, and I was in the academy stuff for 8 years. That's all I did, 40 hours a week, right?
So at least you're getting in the academy, you're getting people that want to learn. They're like trying to pass.
But we also had to do the in-service. And recruits are great because recruits are earnest, right? They want to just soak it all in. But
absolutely,
in-service is where it's a pain in the ass. So you just have to learn how to manage those personalities. But my thing was is that I was constantly having to have these conversations with each new commander. So we get a command rotation like every 2 to 3 years. So I get a new lieutenant, new captain, new commander, new division chief, right? And it was almost like I had to start the educational process again, because every time they rotated, they didn't value training. They'd be like, why do you spend so much time on firearms? Why do you spend so much time on arrest control? We need more time for what I call flavor of the month topics, woke stuff like, diversity training or dealing with the elderly or, don't shoot a dog training. Some dumb shit shoots a dog and now we got a good day of training on it. Right. So, and I was constantly having that battle, because they just didn't value it. They didn't understand the value of it. They typically weren't tactical guys. So they didn't understand. And, my saying that I have, I don't know where I stole it from, is minimal training yields minimal results. Yeah. And if you're going to give people minimal training, you're going to have more use of force. You're going to have more excessive force. You're going to have more bad decisions, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Especially when they get an admin, they get that little gun, duty belt goes away, and all of a sudden, none of that's real important to them. It totally, I don't know, something happens to your brain when you become high up admin. I think we've all seen it. But yeah, I mean, Graham, it's got to blow your mind like it blows mine when you have somebody on the line that's been a cop, say like 15 years, and they pull their mag out and the first attempt, it's backwards. Stuff like that where you're like, they don't even, how many times has a fire instructor told you how to stage and index your mag and you just put it in backwards first attempt? They get it done, but just little things like that in my mind, and I don't know if it's because I'm a instructor, but it's like, if I was an instructor, I'd want to be proficient at reloading. I don't get it, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like they don't care. A funny story I remember, and this isn't really a story about somebody not caring. It's just about somebody being unplugged. And when I say unplugged, I mean like they're just not with us. They're checked out, right? Yeah. And I'm running a firing line. There's about 20 people on the firing line, and we're doing volley after volley after volley. And I look over at this particular sergeant, and she has Mickey Mouse earphones, and they're up on her head like this.
Oh, jeez.
And you've got 20 people all shooting at the same time. 2 rounds fire, 3 rounds fire, 4.
Loud
stuff going around. And I'm thinking, well, she must have, foamies in, because how sometimes people put foamies in, then they put the Mickey Mouse on top, and all of a sudden they can't hear, so they remove it. So I've seen that before. So I was like, well, I just kept on going. I was like, okay, she must have foamies in. And then finally I kind of walked over and I looked around, and sure enough, she didn't have any ear pro on. And she wasn't flinching or nothing. I'm talking 20 people going hard, right? Like,
oh my gosh.
And so, I called it, I'm like, all right, down, scan, holster up. Everybody holsters, and I go, hey, you don't have ear pro? And she goes, oh, thanks. Put them back on. Like, she did not get it. Like, so, and I thought about that after the fact, and I thought, how could that happen? I mean, unless you're already deaf, and she's not deaf. Like, so I'm like, it can only mean to me that you're so unplugged and removed, like you don't want to be there and you're stressed out, and somehow you're just having audible exclusion from the stress. I don't know. Yeah. It blew me away. It blows me away to this day. That was probably 15 years ago. 20 years ago.
That's insane, dude. When I made that mistake at during like instructor research, and where we have the ear pros where you can, hear, but sometimes it's not good enough, especially inside if it's echoey. So I'll kind of pull them off. And we've all done that where it's like a line in front of you will go and you have yours off and it's like, whoa, you put them back on. You're like,
the second it goes off, you're like, oh shit. And you put your ears on, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's had that happen at least once in their life.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's loud as hell, right? Can you imagine 20 people going hard? String after string, and you don't notice it.
It's like Afghanistan. You're just standing there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's funny, man. Funny and sad. Graham, can you describe a like very strange or bizarre thing you dealt with on the job?
Yeah. So one of the weirdest things I ever bumped into was I met a couple of mannequin lovers in my career. So one was in a department store humping mannequins, and the other one was at his house. His mom had died. He was an older guy. He was in his 60s, and his mom was in her 90s, and she died naturally. And we went to his house, and it was just a routine death investigation. We go on these like every week, right? Old people expire all the time, and there was nothing unusual about the death. But for starters, she died in her chair, and he finds her dead, makes his breakfast, eats his breakfast, doesn't call us. Goes to the store. He has to pick up one of his prescriptions. As he's talking to the pharmacist, he mentions, I found my mom dead in the chair this morning. And the pharmacist is like, did you call anybody? And he's like, no, do you think I should? And she's like, yeah. So anyway, so he goes back home and then he calls us. That's very odd, honestly, right?
Yeah.
So she had like 101 things wrong with her. Her doctor's like, yeah, she was going to die any moment. She had cancer. She had all these other, ailments. But here's the thing is that he had mannequins all over his house where he lived with her. So I'm talking like dressed up mannequins, just sitting in chairs, this kind of thing, right? Like in different positions and standing in the corner, and they had wigs on them and everything. And there's body parts everywhere. So like arms and legs, like he obviously like mix and match. And and the guy was like very forward about it. Like he wasn't ashamed about it at all. I'm like, are these your girlfriends? And he goes, they're my dolls. And he was very serious about that. That's what he called them, his dolls. And I go, so you have relationships with them, right? And he's like, well, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so how do you get off? Because they don't have holes. And he's like, they're my dolls. We have a relationship, right? And I got him to pose for a picture with one of them. And he's sitting there. I mean, this is pre-body camera, obviously, right?
Yeah.
He's sitting there with one of his dolls, like with
oh my God.
Very serious, right? So the picture is in the book. And I also discussed that story in the book. And the other dude was at department store. And when people, they're watching him on camera because he's acting kind of weird. He's got a hoodie on. And loss prevention's watching him. They're like following around because they just had a feeling about him. And they thought he was going to steal something. But, he'd get up to a mannequin and he'd like lift the dress. First, he'd look around and there's nobody around. He'd lift the dress up and he'd whip out his cock. He had this huge cock. It's like kind of, right? And he's just humping these mannequins and like feeling the boobs and stuff on these mannequins, these headless mannequins. And
wow.
Yeah, so they called us and we catch him leaving in the parking lot. And we had to taser him. Like he fought us. He was already a registered sex offender. And he was from Africa, some African country. But anyway, it was bizarre. I never knew there was mannequin lovers before until I got into police work, right? And there's pictures of both those guys in the book.
Man, what a waste of a great piece,
That's what I was thinking. I thought exactly the same thing. Yeah.
What a weirdo. And that's got to cause all kinds of problems too, where like now you're not just at unattended. You're like, you probably had to call homicide because it's like, we got to figure out why didn't you tell? And you're weird as hell. Yeah. Good chance you might have killed her, right?
Well, that's exactly where we went with it because I was a patrol sergeant at the time and I had a young officer basically was assigned to the call. And I'm looking for anything suspicious. And there was nothing suspicious other than he was super fucking weird and that he didn't call it in. He went to the store first. Right. So, I eventually was like, you know what? I'm just going to call the detectives and have them come out. And they came out and they did their thing. And in the end, they're like, yeah, he's just super fucking weird.
Damn. That's a good one, brother. Hey, man, my apologies. Jagged Blue Line, your book. We're gonna talk about that in depth, and there's gonna be links to it and everything like that. But I didn't put it in the intro, so shame on me. But it doesn't matter. We're gonna hit it up, and that story's in there. So I can only imagine the other stories that are in there. I wanted to also give a shout out to the great Roger Plank. He is the one that connected us. He's part of the Colorado Rangers. What is the Colorado Rangers?
Yeah, so everybody's heard of the Texas Rangers. Nobody's heard of the Colorado Rangers, right?
Right.
They're reserve in Colorado. They're a reserve organization, but they're statewide. They're the only statewide reserve organization.
Interesting.
And so I've been training them for several years, and they have, I'd say, about 60 to 70 members statewide, somewhere around there.
Almost like a posse.
Yeah, and they help out but they're commissioned officers, and they help out with everything from big towns to small towns. So, like, for example, they'll help Denver PD with Bronco games, just for crowd control and traffic and stuff. And then smaller places, they'll do patrol alongside that small jurisdiction's officer. They also work a lot of big events. Like, let's say some small town has a music festival where 10,000 people come in for one weekend. They'll help them out, give them bodies for that, help them work that, because the small town might have 5 guys on their job, right? So
that's pretty cool.
20 guys to go help. Yeah, it's great. And, they're all, what I was interested in was that when I started getting to know these guys, they're not like cop wannabes, or they're not like guys who using it as a stepping stone to be an officer. It's guys who they have professions. I mean, there's doctors, there's attorneys, there's a lot of guys in computer work, like programmers and stuff like that. But anyway, they just want to help out. They just want to serve the community and help out a little bit. And I think that's really cool.
It is really cool. I just put their badge up on the screen. Pretty cool badge too. I was thinking this was like guys who retired or separated but wanted to stay involved. But you can actually go through a certification program, and do they have to go to a full-time academy, or do they have a special academy?
And there is a couple of retired guys in there, but most of them not. And they go through a reserve academy, which is condensed academy. It just has minimal hours of stuff like that. And then they get a reserve commission. And I think the way it works is under Colorado Post is that if you have a reserve commission, when you're doing law enforcement duties, you're supposed to be with somebody with a full-time commission. And, basically, if you go on patrol, they would make the arrest and you would assist them, kind of thing. But they still have a lot of powers.
Yeah, that's nice too. I mean, seriously, I work at a small place. It would, in our the sheriffs in our county are actually doing that a little bit now, supplementing patrols for bigger cities that have had trouble with retention and having officers. But that's exactly what they do. They come out of the jail and they go on patrol, but the city or town they're in is the lead, and they're kind of there. But sometimes you just need a second person with authority with you. You know what to do, but it's not safe. And to have another person, that's kind of cool. That unfortunately, Massachusetts is completely dismantled their reserve program statewide. It's no longer, they got rid of the reserve academy. And, Mass is one of those states where it's they had a knee-jerk reaction to the George Floyd thing where, shocker. The state of Mass has never had a problem with anything like that, and actually has a really good record for use of force, one of the best in the country. But they're the first ones to go, all right, we need to dismantle our reserve program, and everybody has to go through the full-time academy. So now it's how do you get it? We actually did have doctors and stuff on SWAT teams that were reserves. But it's nice to have a doctor as your medic on a SWAT team.
Absolutely.
And now those guys all had to go to this big bridge academy to get their hours up. And so you're not going to get a doctor or even Bob the Builder to do a couple patrols a week in your town when he has to go through an 875-hour academy. He's got a job. He can't do that. So we kind of got rid of that. And it's actually it's really hurt Western Mass, where we would use reserves for supplemental stuff, where if they didn't want to bridge, then they're gone now. And, of course, Eastern Mass is all built up, big cities, big towns. They have huge full-time police departments. We don't have that. So now we're kind of left either, working tons of overtime or just having to put the state on patrol sometimes because someone's out sick or has vacation or whatever. And it's not, I don't know. I don't think it ended up how they thought it would,
Yeah. Well, they don't know what they're doing. The people in charge, it's kind of like the same people who make gun laws. They know nothing about guns.
Right. This is my AR-14.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. AR-10 for assault rifle, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Take clips.
Right. Yeah. The clips thing, I always get on guys. It's a magazine. They're like, yeah, whatever, Steve. Whatever, Steve. Just qualify me.
Yeah.
Graham, can you tell us about your most intense or terrifying call you've been on? ProForce Law Enforcement, the best damn cop shop in the nation. Whether you are purchasing for an entire agency or an individual officer looking to buy firearms or duty gear, these guys are the best in the biz. With law enforcement exclusive pricing, ProForce Law Enforcement is a place you want to be buying your guns and duty gear. They carry all the top industry brands, and the guys and gals that work there understand exactly what law enforcement officers need. As a listener of this show, you get access to exclusive pricing on the gear you depend on every day. Visit tps.proforceonline.com for special deals on optics, duty gear, and tactical accessories that aren't available anywhere else. Really, really good deals on this. The link for that will be in the show notes. You can also visit their showroom in Prescott, Arizona, or store in Brea, California to get hands-on with the gear, or shop nationwide at proforceonline.com. Their dedicated law enforcement support team is always ready at 1-800-367-5855. Thank you, ProForce.
I would say the intense ones was I was involved in 3 shootings as a SWAT officer. Well, actually, 2 as a SWAT officer and 1 on patrol. And, getting shot at is always an eye-opener, and it wakes you up for a minute, especially when you don't know where it's coming from. So, one of them which they shot through the front of my car, and it actually went through the hood and lodged in my heater. And I'm lucky It was only a 380 and it was ball ammo. So it didn't have a whole lot of velocity and penetration power, but that gets your attention, especially when you don't know where it's coming from. That was a gunshot, right? But you're not sure where it came from. So, I was already stepped out the car when that happened, but I just basically ran to cover. I found another car that I got behind the engine block, which is like the only cover right in the car, maybe the wheel well. And I'm like, fuck, where did that come from? I would have returned fire. I had an AR in my hands. I would have returned fire, but I didn't know where it came from.
Why were you there in the first place?
Yeah, so it was an interesting one. Basically, the guy, it started out as a shoplift, but then as he was trying to get away from loss prevention, he carjacked somebody. And then he broke into a house, and we had him circled in the house. And at first, he had a kid in the house, like a 14-year-old that just happened to be home from school. And luckily, he didn't keep that kid as a hostage. The kid's like, can I go? And he's like, yeah, take off. So that was cool. But then the homeowner left all his guns out. So now he's armed with the homeowner's guns. And so, eventually he ended up shooting a bunch of times at us. But that was the first round that went off. And, in the end, he was taken into custody in the end, but it became a standoff that went on overnight. And he had 50 bags of meth on him that he swallowed in a panic. And what was crazy is he had some sort of weird blood clotting stuff that happened where they had to surgically remove his calves. So when he came to court,
what?
Yeah, he had no calves and he couldn't really walk properly. He walked like he was,
it's like having 2 fake legs or something.
Yeah, it was really weird. And so, bizarre, but I've never seen such a charging sheet ever. It had 12 counts of attempt murder of a police officer, had armed robbery on there, burglary on there. I mean, multiple counts of everything. It was the longest charge sheet I've ever seen in my career.
Wow.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Damn, man. That's nuts. Yeah, you're lucky it was a 380. I'm sure you had in Colorado. Can you is it one of those states where you can, if it's in your house, you can just leave your guns lying around?
Not anymore, but at the time you could. So this would have been, 10 years ago. And they have since passed legislation that, your stuff has to be locked up.
Especially the kids in there. He's got access to all these guns.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I mean, it's one of those things where, I'm super pro 2A.
Me too.
But I do think that you should lock up your stuff, especially, when you're not home. Now, look, if you don't have any kids in the home and you're at home, I don't have a problem with you leaving it out. I'm talking about when you leave the home so somebody doesn't steal it. Because, all the guns I ever took off bad guys were taken in burglaries.
Yeah.
They're always going out of somebody's home. They just look under your bed or look in your closet and in your chest drawer, and they're like, "Oh, cool, a gun." Right? They know where to look. Plus I'm always concerned about kids, and I don't want to give more ammunition to the other side, pun intended, to take away our rights.
Yeah.
So, I want people to be responsible gun owners.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Mass is kind of similar. We have enhanced penalties if a kid gets access to a gun, but if you are alone in your house or it's just two adults, and you have the gun out, it's like it's very open to interpretation to the responding officer because it's under your control. So if you're in the room with the gun, that's under your control. Now, if a cop comes over for some reason from an alarm in your house or whatever, and he finds a loaded AR upstairs and you're in the garage, they might argue that wasn't under your control, but really you're alone in the house. So who really cares? You know what I mean? But that's the problem. Mass does a lot of case law.
And I really don't like gun laws because I feel it's a really slippery slope. I know that's kind of, people say that all the time, the slippery slope, but it's true. I mean, really,
you can see it.
Once you start making people never take your rights forthwith. They take them in little increments, and that way you don't really notice it, and there's not the outrage, right? It's kind of like the anti-gun crowd. They don't ever say we're going to ban guns. Well, some of them do, the real far wackos, but the smart ones, such as our, people in charge now, not for long, they will just hit things here and there because they know there won't be the same outrage, and they'll try to make things harder for you. Like they'll put an ammo tax on, or they'll ban certain types of ammo, right? So that it just makes it harder for you to the point where the average citizen goes, screw it, it's not worth it, or it's too expensive. Yeah, something like that.
Mass just did that with a sweeping gun law. Exactly that thing. They presented this bill as the ghost gun bill. So you can't build, which, like you're saying, I'm not necessarily against looking at that, like someone printing out a gun and being able to kill somebody with it. But in that bill, that was just this much of the bill. The rest of the bill, pretty much, I mean, they've done things now where if you have an FID card, we have license to carry, and we have an FID, which is for long guns. If you have an FID card, you can no longer own a semi-automatic gun, period. All these hunters and people who target shoot, who never cared to carry a gun or have a license to carry, now have to overnight become felons and have to give up their semi-autos. And it's like they have old Browning shotguns they own from their great grandfather. It's like, oh, you can't legally have that anymore. So and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, this bill started, and then the Chiefs of Police Association got involved to lobby changing it. They didn't even have cutouts for law enforcement. So they were saying, like, when one of our officers where I work has to drive through a school zone to go home, if you weren't on duty, you could not have a gun anywhere near school zone. So this kid going home would have to leave his gun at the station or take a half an hour route to go the other way. So, and they were cool with that. And then, so we were able to nip a lot of that stuff out, but then it looks really bad to the public where they're like, oh, look at this. All the legal gun owners in Mass who also, by the way, have not committed any crimes. All these guys look at it and go, oh, they made a cutout for the cops. Great. Cops are taken care of. So guess what? They're going to stop fighting against it because, and they added retired cops. So like, oh, now cops and retired cops are good. They're taken care of as always. And now as a citizen, I can't go into the store and buy a semi-automatic gun. Like, well, what the hell are we doing? So that
creates a little bit of the us and them too, right? Like, the citizens start looking at us as separate, like us and them. And I don't
absolutely.
Like that either. Yeah.
No,
I don't like that either.
I used to go to the range on Cape Cod where I used to live, and Massachusetts has banned Glocks unless it was made like prior to 1998, and it's already in the state. So you cannot. It's on the approved roster list, but it's banned in the AG's office. I don't know how this works, but so a gun store can't sell one retail. A cop can sell one privately to a citizen. Private sale. So. But anyways, so I would go to the range and I would have a Glock 35 long slide. I thought all these new Glocks, that I picked up over the years. And my buddies I go with were the people that were at the range and would look at them and be like, oh, it must be nice. You can have a Glock. There's really nothing. Glocks are super safe. They're drop safeties. It only goes off if you pull the trigger. They just wouldn't play ball with the AG's office. And now none of these guys can have them, but they see us cops with tons of Glock stuff.
Yep.
And it's they get pissed. They're nice guys, but on the inside, I can tell they're like, F that.
Yeah, it's not good.
Not good. Not good at all. Now, thinking back in your career, can you think of a heartwarming situation? Warm the cockles of your heart.
I mean, that would be a hard one. I mean, I'd say
it's always a hard one.
Something that resonates with me, though, is, I once went on a domestic violence. The neighbors called. It was an apartment complex where it turned out it wasn't domestic violence. It was a rape in progress. And this guy was a fucking monster. I mean, like NFL lineman big, right?
Yep.
And so, I ended up having to fight this dude with my nightstick. And this woman was ripped all her clothes off. She was naked on the floor, huddled, crying. He hadn't actually got to business yet. So I showed up at the perfect time, right? But anyway, after the court proceeding, she came into the lobby of the courthouse and very sincerely thanked me for saving her life.
Yeah.
And that was something that was, I'll always remember that. That's the kind of stuff that keeps you coming back.
Absolutely. You need a win like that once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Something.
Yeah.
Dude, that's sketchy. Did you ever have the opportunity to follow up with her or know where her life led or anything?
She told me she was moving out of state because here's the deal is that he actually got off on the rape charge, the attempted rape. They got him on some misdemeanors like a false imprisonment for not letting her leave, but an assault because he slapped her around a little bit, but like misdemeanor stuff. There was a guy in the jury who was very traditionalist, who thought that, women were like men's property and stuff like that. And the whole jury hated him. They wanted to kill him, but they couldn't like break through it. He would not go with the rape charge, the attempted rape charge. So,
is that because they had a relationship? He figured he had a right to it.
They had formally dated, and that's what that was a monkey wrench in his cogs. He couldn't get over that, and they just couldn't. So it was 5 versus 1, and they could not convince him. So he would not go with that. So they just, in the end, they ended up, convicting him of like 2 misdemeanors. And she goes, well, I'm moving to Texas. I'm leaving, and I don't blame her.
Yeah. And, get as far away from that guy as possible.
Mm-hmm. But at least he was going to be in jail for a few months to give her a head start,
Yeah. That is unfortunately pretty rare in police work, actually walking into and stopping a situation like that. We're usually dealing with the aftermath of it. Mm-hmm. That must have felt really, really good.
Yeah. I had a female officer with me, and she was in front of me, and she knocked on the door, and this dude was a fucking monster. I'm talking like 6'4", 250, right? Not really fat, just a big man. Yeah. And he pushed her, like he just hit her with all his power, like a football block in the chest, knocked her down the steps. We were on the 2nd floor. And so I just kicked the door open, and I had my baton, and I hit him in the shins a couple of times, and he went down. And it was a fucking nightmare call. It really was. It was scary.
I bet. Yeah. The baton, man, talk about a lot of times underutilized tool that we have, especially since taser has become the end all be all in everybody's eyes. Outside of law enforcement, little they know it only works half the time. But damn it, I always thought when they taught us baton in academy, we had this great instructor from a bigger city, and he was he's one of these guys that's old school, and he's like, you know what? He goes, don't be impish, don't be afraid. He goes, the chiefs give you these batons because they want you to use them. That's what he would tell us.
I don't know about that, but okay. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why we're all chuckling, okay. Because it is that one tool we have that has a relatively low entry point to use that can cause permanent damage. Like this guy would be like, hey, when you go to a bar fight, and this guy was famous for using his baton. If he could, he would. That was the thing about this guy, and he was a wicked fighter, tough guy. Worked for New Bedford, which is a kind of rough and tumble little port city, and he would say he'd he'd show you, do all the tactical stuff like the stances, and he'd have the baton laying across his back, and he goes, as soon as he puts his deuce up, break his hand. Puts his other one, break his other hand. Break his this, break his that. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is great for a bar fight. You're gonna be breaking dudes' bones. He's like, you can do it. He goes, assaultive stance. He's been fighting. He's like, he's being assaulted.
Well, we had long batons, so not the collapsibles.
Oh, you had the real deal.
Yeah, and there's pros and cons to it. Like one of the cons is that it ends up sitting in the car a lot because you take it off to get in the car, you put it back on when you get out of the car,
Right.
because it's too big, you can't like wear it.
But way more useful in a fight.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as wielding power, way more powerful than a collapsible. You can do some serious damage with it.
Dude, I felt the same way when they were teaching us on like the 18-inch collapsible. I'm like, I have to get extremely close to this person for this thing to work. Like you were getting.
Not to mention, the collapsible just doesn't wield the same power, But I mean, on the other hand, I mean, there's pros to the collapsible though, right? You've got it with you all the time. You never lose it, even when you go eat. You got it on your belt. Versus, we would never take our batons to go eat. And in fact, I remember one huge fight I got in where I went to just interview somebody, thinking I wouldn't need a baton, so I left it in the car, and I just happened to bump into somebody else in the apartment complex on my way there, and got this huge fist fight.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, and I was like, man, I wish I brought it, But so there was that, Whereas this collapsible, you got it with you all the time. So there's pros and cons.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember going fishing with my dad, and he was a copper for like 32 years. And I remember when I was a kid going fishing, he had in the boat a little wooden baton with a leather strap on it, and it had if you look down it from the end, it had lead in it. It was gray.
Oh yeah.
And so that was his. I mean, he retired now 15 years ago, but that was like his old baton when he started, like in like the 70s or late 70s, and we used to use it to like knock out bluefish because they teeth and stuff, and so he would just use it to whack fish. And I remember being like, "What? This is a cool club. It's so heavy." He goes, "Yeah, they fill it with lead so that when you hit somebody, it really resonates with them."
Oh yeah.
But it was an old school baton. And he had they had all kinds of stuff. They had I've never even seen one, but I've heard the old timers talk about like blackjacks and saps and like leather covered lead weights they would use as a corrective measure, usually for like teenagers and stuff. I'm like, what the hell? You basically like giving kids a spanking with a leather sap. You know what I mean? You just kind of whack people on the forearm or whatever to. I guess they were like for compliance. Like someone would put their hand behind the back to start whacking them with the sap.
I remember guys were carrying that kind of stuff when I started in '92, but honestly, they weren't that effective in my opinion.
Were they like? Are they like? Is it like piece of leather with lead in it that with a tail or something?
They were flat.
Okay.
They were like flat, almost like a paddle, but smaller.
Yeah.
Like 6 inches long and maybe 2.5, 3 inches wide.
Okay.
And flat, but covered in leather. And I don't know, man. I think they went away because they weren't really that effective, honestly.
Yeah, I always wondered, like, what did you use them for? I mean, except for, I don't know, slapping somebody around.
Well, yeah. I mean, really, the only place they're going to do damage is in the head.
And you can't use them there, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, and back then maybe they did, but these days you can't, right?
Right. Yeah. Dude, there's so many good old school stories that I've heard from old coppers in my area where they're, one guy's chasing a guy and his baton flew off and the guy turned around and fight him. So he had his, he was in the habit of a motor vehicle stop, have the mag light, the big one, and you put it under your armpit so your hands are free and you're talking to the person, you have their info and the light shining in their face. Well, the guy had boogied on him. And then turned around. He was on the highway. Turned around to try to fight him. And he's the only thing I could think of. He's like, I just took my my mag light and I just split his head open from the center of his forehead down. I'm like, wow, that is. I mean, weapon of opportunity, right? Like this is what you had. Yeah. But I just think about doing that now, and I'm like, oh man, you would have to you would definitely have to get some union representation immediately.
It'd have to be like a deadly force situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But back then it was like, hey, whatever, the guy shouldn't have, back then judges are like, well, you shouldn't have ran. What are you doing?
And society felt the same way. They would give you a lot more slack versus today they don't, right?
Yeah, absolutely. My dad has said that before. He said he'd go to bar fights and stuff and they would tune people up or he'd get attacked. And, Monday, the next morning, the next court day, you stand the guy there and the judge would kind of be like, the cops would do resisting arrest, and then the guy, the defendant would complain about excessive force, and the judge would go, hey, this is a wash. You know what? Yeah. You broke the law. Force had to be used. So we're not, and the same side against the cops, people don't like being arrested. So we're not going to do resisting for when you try to cuff them or whatever. And, the bad guy would just kind of stand there black and blue and be like, okay. you know, what am I guess I go to jail.
Yeah. Don't do it again.
Yeah. A little bit different.
Yeah.
Goods and bads come with that, of course, but it's hard not to fantasize about those days. Graham, question for you here, really popular on the show. Like we were saying before, there's a lot of people who listen, or there's a majority, obviously pro law enforcement, listen to the show. Some people who just like stories that you guys tell, but a big swath of people who are interested in law enforcement, think about going into law enforcement, maybe are in backgrounds, maybe they're on the fence. I get emails from people from police academy graduations, and they go, I listen to like you guys, like the men and women that come on here tell their stories, and it made me, pull the trigger, pun intended, and become a cop. What would you tell people getting into the profession now? What would be some sage advice for them?
Yeah. So when I first left the job 5 years ago, I was the wrong person to ask. I was kind of bitter about things. And if you said, I actually had a couple of people tell me, hey, my kid is thinking about becoming a cop. Can they talk to you? And I'd be like, you don't want them to talk to me. Have them talk to somebody else, right?
At least you told them that.
I did. And, I've kind of changed my opinion over the years about it now. I don't think – so here's the thing. Like when people get in the job now, they don't know how good it used to be. So I think from their perspective, when they come in, they know what the rules are. And it's still a fun job, I'm sure. But, if you knew how fun it used to be, in the early 90s when we were getting car chases every single night, high-speed chases and stuff like that, and we could do all this fun stuff, and we can actually go out and catch bad guys, and, you didn't have everything nitpicked to death. There was definitely stuff that by the end of my career I'd get in trouble for, whereas in the beginning of my career, they would have given me an award for. That's how much it changed, right?
Yeah.
So, but my advice to people is, one, fitness. I think it's the number one self-help. And, there was a study done that showed that working out is equal to talking to a shrink.
Yeah, I've seen that.
That's my verbiage, but, so that's not the study's verbiage, but that's basically what it came down to, is that it was about equally important mentally. So, I've always been a big fitness guy. I never miss workouts. Even if I had a long day, I'd either get up early or, if I absolutely had to miss, I'd do a double the next day. Like I'm pretty fanatical about that. And still at 56, I'm still that way. I'm always in the gym, and I believe it's very crucial to, keeping my head on straight kind of thing. And so that, it's hormonally too, right? You reduce endorphins, and it's a dopamine hit and everything else, right? But on top of that, now, so here's some advice I would give them, is not to get too wrapped around the job. Like, don't make it your identity. I figured this out pretty early in my career. I noticed, because I probably knew half a dozen people on the job who killed themselves. And usually it was like a year to 2 years after they retired. And I think it was because, I noticed that they all had one thing in common. Like, police work was their identity. And I think that when they retired, they'd lost their identity. So after going to a couple of these funerals and really kind of thinking about it, I decided that I was going to make my friend base primarily non-cops. Now, not to say that I don't hang out with cops, and I don't still bump into cops and hang out with them and stuff like that. But, I noticed that whenever I hang out with cops, all we do is talk cop shit.
Yeah.
So we talk about the case we just had, or the foot chase, or the fight, or whatever, and how much we hate our administration and we hate the city.
It's the same everywhere, brother.
It's a lot of negativity, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, all that negativity will drive you down. So, I made a big push to have outside interests, stuff that had nothing to do with police work, and hang out with outside friends. And once in a while, it's okay to talk, about a call or, a memory or something like that, but don't let it dominate the conversation and, dominate your identity, right? So, that was a big thing for me. And, I think keep it in perspective, when you're out there on the job, you have small victories and you do good things, and maybe you save a life once in a while, or, really help somebody out once in a while, something like that. Right. And that's great. But you know what? The police department ran just fine before you got there. It'll run fine when you retire.
Yeah, amen to that. Yep.
We had a board in each district station that had a plaque with engravings of all the names of the people who had retired. They had to do 20 plus years to get on the plaque board, right? And I every year I get a new team, because I was a sergeant for 17 years, and every year I get a new team of 8 to 10 people, right? And we'd have a conversation the first day, and it would include my expectations, and it would also include my little talk about if you have a problem with another officer, don't come running to me unless it's really seriously. Handle it like a man, woman between yourselves, and if you absolutely can't handle it, come get to me. But when it comes to me, it's going to get ugly.
Yeah.
You don't want me involved unless you absolutely have to be, right? I don't want to be involved in that, right? You need to be adults and handle shit between yourselves, right? But I would also talk about how, someday there's going to be 2 young officers standing in front of that board reading the names. And one of them's going to go, Graham Dunn, never heard of him, and move on to the next line. So, keep it in perspective. I mean, yeah, what you're doing is great and everything, but you're not the beginning and end of this career. Police work has been around for a long time. It will be around probably to the end of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great, important, ancient profession, but yeah, you see it all the time. You see guys leave and then come back and visit the station once or twice. And then you run into them at a coffee shop and they're like, gee, I don't even know anybody on the police department anymore. And it's like they're put out. It's like, well, yeah, because you don't work there anymore. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you can't put all your eggs in that basket. My dad's the same as you. He for years never went back to the police department, nothing. And then maybe 10 years later or so, he started, there was like a breakfast once a month, old timer cops in the area. And he started going and he started enjoying it again. He liked seeing these guys and talking about the old days, just once a month, hanging. But for a long, long time, he wanted nothing to do with it. He even told me, like, don't be a cop. Like the exactly what you're saying. I think it's just one of those professions where you just let's be honest, you're just dealing with other people's problems every single day, and it gets old.
Very negative. It's very negative, and it can be very toxic. And I will say for me, it took me about 6 months to unwind. I had about 6 months of a really weird time. I'm a pretty positive person by nature, but it was about 6 months where I was kind of down in the mouth, and I was like, I don't know. I felt like a cop, but I wasn't a cop. And all of a sudden, I broke out of that after about 6 months. And that's when I realized how wound tight I was and how ingrained in the job I was. And I had to step away from that and just be a civilian again.
Yeah, well, good for you for recognizing it.
There's a lot of cop in me. I mean, there's still a lot of cop in me. There's the way I act and the way I look at things. And obviously, when something is anti-police on the TV, I take it a little bit personally, but not like I used to. I'm not as ingrained as I was, for sure. I don't get as wound up as I did.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great, man. I think it's so important too. You said about working out. Something I struggle with is like getting on a good routine, and I'll do it for like 6 months. And then what I do is I'll get hurt or something. I hurt my elbow once, a tendon. And the doctor was like, actually she's a friend of mine. She's like, I said, it's just not healing and I can't do the kettlebell stuff. And cause I couldn't do exactly what I wanted to do, I just stopped working out. Cause I was like, well, I can't do the thing I want and I don't want to do something else. And, she said like, hey, unfortunately, like, an injury like this, put it in a sling for 6 weeks and it will heal. If you don't do that, it's going to take a long time. And boy, was she right. I work 60 plus hours a week, sometimes 70. I can't put my arm in a sling for 6 weeks. So I didn't work out for a year because my elbow hurt every time I did something. So, but there's other things you can do, like even just going for walks, if you go for a long walk outside, it always, it amazes me when I go for a walk with my family and I'm like, damn, I feel good. Like just getting the air, moving your body. And those studies you're talking about, I've read a bunch of them and they're legit. These are legit, like peer reviewed medical studies where they said like, yeah, we've cured people's depression with exercising, cutting down on alcohol and eating just a little better. Like you don't have to go crazy, but if you actually do exercise, the endorphin release in your brain and how it levels your hormones out, it's everything the average American won't do. They will go get the pill. They will get the anti-anxiety medicine. And, maybe some people really do need that because they have a serious imbalance. But they're saying in these studies, like 85% of people like don't need that. That what they need to do is
I would completely agree. And
they need to waddle down the road,
Right. And I'm sure you'd also agree, pharma and food is out of control too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everything's a vaccine, everything's a drug. Instead of just pushing away from the table to lose weight, you take a drug now.
Right.
And, there's an answer for just about everything now, right? So, I mean, we've lost a lot over the years in a negative way because of technology.
Yeah, it's sad but true. I remember the 80s. My mom has always been good about working out, aerobics, everything. But I remember in the 80s and talking about like, the pill's coming out, the pill that takes away your hunger and makes you lose weight. guys, we're still doing it. They're still like, oh, here's, and now finally it's Ozempic, a drug designed for diabetes is now like prescribed to people that want to lose weight. And it's like, damn, it sucks.
People want the quick fix, right? They don't want to just put in the effort.
Right.
Put in the work.
100%. Brother, the book, The Jagged Blue Line, sounds friggin' fascinating, especially having just talking to you for about an hour about like skimming the surface of what you saw on the job. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So it's interesting. People have asked me a couple of times, like, why did you write the book? And I don't have a good answer for that. I had a little bit of free time on my hands, and I just sat down and I guess it was in the back of my mind. I just started brain dumping stories, and it became kind of an addiction. Sometimes I'd sit in front of the computer all day, just typing. And other than like going to the gym or walking the dog, if I had nothing to do, I'd just sit there and brain dump. And before you know it, I've got chapters. And then I hire an editor. Then I hire a graphic designer, and my goal was to hit 50,000 words, and I eventually hit 50,000 words. And, so the writing process probably took me about 6 months. And then the actual publishing was about 6 months of getting everything done. If I did a second one, it would be a lot faster, because you learn from the first experience.
That's not bad though for a first book. That's not bad at all.
It's really not. It's very cathartic. I mean, a lot came back, things I'd forgotten. And so, and amazingly, I've got 5-star reviews on Amazon, which blows me away.
Hell yeah.
I also have an Audible version, which I recorded myself. I went to a recording studio downtown Denver, and the editor wanted me to use a voiceover actor, and I listened to probably half a dozen of them. They send you like 30-second clips of people reading out of your book, and I didn't love any of them. A couple of them are okay, but they weren't exactly what I wanted. And I thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. So I went down there, and I told the producer, we're sitting across the screen from each other, just like in a TV show or a movie, right? And I go, hey man, if I sound like an idiot, please tell me. I'll hire somebody to do this. So I went in and I recorded the first chapter, and I came out and he goes, man, you sound great. He goes, we just got to work on a couple things like slow you down because I speak fast and things like that. But it was very hard doing the Audible. So, they have a microphone in front of your face, and if you move at all, it changes the sound. So you're like frozen there, right? And you're reading off a laptop, scrolling, and your eyes start to get blurry and you start to sweat. And, every about 45 minutes, I'd come out and take a break. So I did 2 or 3 hours at a time. In total, I think I did about 12 hours.
2 or 3 hours at a time? That seems like a lot, man.
But I had to drive downtown, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to kick it out. It was a lot, though. An hour would be much more manageable. Yeah. But the end result is 4 hours, 20 minutes. And, I've had a lot of people listen to it, and they really enjoyed it. And they go, we like it knowing that it's you telling the story.
I love that about audiobooks. I'm always a little bummed when I see that it's not the author.
Yeah. So anyway, it came out really good. I'm really proud of it. The book itself is a collection of stories. Everything in there's true. I have scrubbed it as far as names and times and places just because of slander, because I don't want to get jammed up. So I tell some stories that are true about chiefs and stuff like that, where they, looked after their own or screwed somebody over and then did the same thing themselves or something like that. So, I scrubbed it just so that, I couldn't get sued over it. But if they read it, they definitely know it's them I'm talking about. But, the standard for slander is actually pretty high. Not only do they have to know that it's themselves, other people, they have to prove other people know. And they also have to prove that they've had a loss, either to their character or financially. So
and that it's untrue, right? It has to be untrue.
And that it's untrue, yeah. So, but I don't want to deal with any legal battles, so I don't
blame you.
To begin with. I'm not a rich guy who has tons of money to throw to an attorney, right? So, right. But it's also not a tale of bitterness, and I wanted that to be true too, because when I wrote the book and I first read it, I was like, I sound bitter in some of these stories. So I went back through, and so it's kind of a collection of stories. Some of them are just funny. Some of them are just bizarre, like the mannequins. Some of them are kind of tragic. Like I've got a whole chapter on all the deaths I worked. I worked something like 450 or 550 death investigations in my career. Oof. I worked it out. Yeah. And some of them are about, there's one chapter on all the time I went to internal affairs. So it's different.
That sounds interesting.
It's kind of all over the place. Yeah. And it shows, the internal affairs chapter shows the the lunacy of police work, how it is today. The stuff you get in trouble for, and you're like, really? I thought he did a good job. I'm amazed he got in trouble for that. But I'm really proud of it. I thought it came out really well. I've had a lot of people read it that know me and don't know me, and I've got nothing but good reviews on it. And I've asked people straight up. I'm like, look, if there's something in there you don't like or you think I could improve, please tell me. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I want to prove it, because you can go back in and change your manuscript, and it gets reviewed by the author, and once not the author, the editor, and once that is approved, it usually takes just a couple of days. Everybody who orders a book from then on gets a new changed version.
Oh, no kidding.
So, no, I can't change the Audible. The Audible's done, right? I'd have to go to the recording studio, and it'd be a huge nightmare.
Yeah, but, forget that.
As far as the book itself, it's pretty easy. And, since I published it, and I found 2 spelling errors. And what it wasn't the word was misspelled. It was just, so for example, one of them was corner instead of corner. And in this particular chapter, I mentioned the corner like 5 times. And every time I read it, I just kind of skimmed over it. And the editor skimmed over it too. Like he didn't catch it either. Yep. And it was actually one of my sons who read it and goes, this is supposed to be corner, right? Not corner. And I was like, oh, man. So I went back in and changed it. Little things like that. That's
pretty normal, too, for any book. I've seen that in tons of books. There's just kind of like little flub ups. So I've talked to authors before that are cops, and some of the guys were, granted, they had PTSD from the job anyways, and everybody probably has a little bit to some extent, but did it in any way, you said it was cathartic, but did it in any way bum you out or bring up some bad stuff when you were kind of like recounting in detail some of the stuff you went on?
No, I don't think I still to this day don't think I have PTSD. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I do. And I think it's because everything I did, I feel pretty good about. Like, right. I don't feel like I did anything, outside the law or something I need to be ashamed of, right? Did I always make the right decisions? Oh, no, I'm not saying that, but I didn't do anything malicious or intentionally bad, right? So I think I'm at one with myself. My conscience is clear, so to speak.
That's great.
Do I regret some things I do over? Absolutely. And I talk about some of those in the book, things I didn't handle properly. I could have handled better or whatever. But no, I didn't have anything come back to me as like, bother me, but there was stuff. It was interesting. I mentioned I wanted to get at 50,000 words because look, dude, I'm not an author. I just Googled how many words is the average.
That's great. Yeah.
And they came up with 50,000. I was like, all right, that's my goal, right? So I get to 35,000 words, and I kind of get into a stopping point. Like I was like, man, what else do I write about, right? So what I did was I drove downtown with one of my sons and 19-year-old, and I said, hey, would you take notes for me? And he goes, sure. So we just drove around town. Literally, we drove around town for 2 hours, and I was like, oh man. And I give him the intersection and go, just write that intersection and hanging. And then we go another block and go, oh, write that intersection, foot chase. We went another couple blocks, write that intersection, death. And he just made notes. So I came back, I had like 10 notes, and I kicked out another 15,000 words like it was nothing. I was just stuff I'd forgotten. And, driving through the old neighborhood downtown, it came back to me.
That is a genius move. You know how many cops I've talked to that talk about driving through their old patrol area and everything pops up just from looking at the neighborhoods? That's smart, man.
Every block had a story, man. I mean, every block you either chase a guy or, had a fight or something happened, right?
Yep.
You remember. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super smart. I think people listening to this book are thinking about or listening to this podcast thinking about writing a book, and that's a cop. That's a pro tip right there, brother.
Well, and I'll tell you another thing. When I read a book, and maybe this is what gave me the idea, but I read a book by a guy I used to work with, and it was really well written. Like he's a very intellectual guy, and I could hear him reading it. And it's funny. People have told me the same things when they read my book. If they know me, they hear me tell them the story. They hear my voice in their head, right? But anyway, I could hear him reading it. It was very well written, but it was kind of all over the place. Like it was an average day on patrol. And he'd talk about like the noise complaint and then, a car chase or whatever, and then back to go and get coffee or whatever. And, quite frankly, a lot of the stories were kind of mundane and they weren't that interesting, but I think he was trying to impart like an average day on patrol. And we all know that that's what it is, right? It's 90% boredom, 10% panic, right? And I was like, well, I don't want it to be that. I think I want it to be all just very interesting stuff. So I left out all the stuff I didn't think was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Smart.
Stuff that's fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. You wouldn't want to live it that way, but for the reader or someone you're trying to entertain, that's the way to do it, I think.
Yeah, I think the biggest compliment I've got on the book is from a couple people who weren't police, who I've had two people tell me that it has really changed their opinion of police in a positive way.
That's excellent.
Like they didn't understand, and now they think they understand better, and they give them a lot more slack, a lot more kudos, for being in law enforcement. And that, to me, that was a big compliment. I was like, that's very nice to hear. We had a book signing, and my wife taught me into it. I wasn't even going to do it. She goes, you need to have a book signing. The book had been out like a month, and I was like, nobody's going to show up to this thing, right? So anyway, we rented this my local bar and tavern. They've got it downstairs, and they go, how many people you think you get? And I go, honestly, I'll be happy if 10 people show up, right?
Yeah.
I didn't think I was only really doing it because my wife pushed me into it, right? I had like 300 people.
You're kidding me. That's unbelievable. That's awesome.
I had a line out the door for like 3 hours of me signing at a table, and I signed every single one. And I tried to spend at least a minute with each person, just talking to them real quick and asking them how they thought about the book and stuff. And that was really cool, man. It was so humbling. And
phenomenal.
To hear people, so most of them had read it already, and they were telling me, what they liked about the book and stuff like that. So, and I was always asking for criticism. I'm like, so what didn't you like? And there really wasn't much. A couple people said, well, but it was more stuff like I had a hard time reading the death chapter. That was kind of disturbing, things like that. Not like, it was stupid or it sucked or something.
It's disturbing, but they liked it. Come on.
Yeah.
People like
they still read it.
Yeah.
Give them nightmares.
Dude, that's phenomenal. You know what? You need to, have you ever been on the Cops and Writers podcast? Patrick O'Donnell. No. He's a retired Milwaukee sergeant, published author. He's actually into a series now of fiction, but phenomenal guy. I mean, just like you, great stories from the job. And he might even have like a mastermind group for it's just police officers who are authors. You'd be a phenomenal guest for him, and you guys could talk shop on writing, especially.
Contact info from you.
Oh yeah, I'll do an intro email if you want. You guys can.
Cool, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Chat it out, of course, brother. Graham, honor to have you on the show, man. Great interview, great stories. The link to the book will be in the show notes, so everybody can go there and pick it up. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right, good. I'm glad to hear it, man. I got to do the outro of the show. Can you hang on for just like 2 minutes?
Absolutely. Hey, one quick thing is at the very beginning, you said it was Ragnar Rock.
I know. I've been thinking about it the whole time. I'm sorry.
All right. Just letting you know. Yeah.
Ragnar Tactical is what it is. And I will put the link to so there's no mistaking it. The link to your training website will also be in the show notes.
I appreciate it.
Ragnar Tactical. We went through a bunch and I was like, there was more than a few.
So many, right? Yeah. And I'm going to email you the link to the book right now.
All right. Perfect. Yeah. All right, brother. Thank you again. And I will be right back with you.
Thanks, man.
The great Graham Dunn, phenomenal stories. Honored to have him on. Thank you for that, sir. Let us get to the Patreon sergeants. If you really, really love the show, you've binge listened to a lot of episodes. You really appreciate it. You're getting a lot out of it from all the free content out there that I'm putting out. You can join the Patreon. The link is in the show notes. I truly appreciate it. If you pick sergeant level or above, you will get a shout out. And who I'm talking about is lieutenant level, the great and powerful Andy Biggs, the great Thomas Connell, lieutenant level. Now the sergeants. Adam Alexander, everybody. The great Adam McMahon. The great Adam Mihal, ladies and gentlemen. Ben Peters. Bentley Barnett. Thank you, sir. The great Brad Thompson. Dan Carlson from Burley Boards. Amazing woodworker. Check him out on Instagram. Thank you, sir. Sherry Finch. Thank you, madame. The great Clark Luckoff. Thank you, sir. The great Dave Ellman. Dennis Carrasquillo, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Dennis. Doug and Kelly Newman. Love you guys. Hope you're having a blast in Wyoming. The great Dylan Mosher. The great Elliot Sykes, ladies and gentlemen. Gary Steiner. George Cariotis, everybody. Greg Gabboy, I appreciate you, sir. The great James Rose. Jason Labrie, everybody. Jason Lau. The great John Jordan. John Shoemaker. John and Aaron Kate. Love you guys. See you at church. Kyle Roberts, everybody. Warren Stimson, the handsome Lane Campbell, the great Lisa Gano, Michael Roach from Roach Machines AI Solutions. Check him out. Iceman from Motor Cop Chronicles. Check out his podcast. The great Nancy Hammond. Nick Adams, everybody. Thank you, sir. Paul Maloney, ladies and gentlemen. Raymond Arsenal. That's Sergeant Raymond Arsenal to you. Thank you very much. Richard Tolles, keep on trucking, brother. Thank you for the support. Sasha McNabb, Scott Young, everybody. Sean Clifford, Seth Wright, Sheriff Ronald Long, Tammy Walsh, holding it down at dispatch. Thank you, Tammy. The great Tony Fahey, William James Long, that's Deputy William James Long to you. Thank you very much. The great Zachary Pleat and George Tessier. Thank you, sir. Love you. See you at church, guys. That is the shout out list. I can barely talk after the shout out list for the Patreon supporters. Sergeant or above, you get the shout out. And if you just join up at the patrolman level, you also get an extra Cops in the News episode per month. And I will mail you, let me show you, this vinyl 3x3 Things Police See sticker, which I think is pretty snazzy. But I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.